Hey there, welcome to the Energy Blueprint Podcast. I'm your host, Ari Whitten, and today I have with me Keith Norris, who is the founder of Paleo FX. And before I give you his official bio, I want to tell you about Paleo FX briefly and tell you about a little contest they're running. So Paleo FX is an awesome health summit. It is, if you're going to go to one health summit next year in 2020, this is the one to go to. Also, I'm going to be a speaker there. We'll mention that a bit more, but I'm going to be giving an epic talk. I have a bunch of friends and colleagues that are going to be giving amazing talks there. So this is really a must-attend event. It's going to be in Austin, Texas, 2020 in April 2020. Right now, from November 29th through December 16th, they have a VIP contest, a VIP giveaway where you can basically, all you got to do is go to a web page. You can go to the energyblueprint.com/paleo, and we're going to have this link there. And on this page, you can enter your name and email. It's all you got to do. And you can potentially win a $5,000 prize package that includes airfare, hotel, and 2 VIP badges to the Paleo FX event. Plus, there's a whole bunch of other potential prizes you can win, all kinds of cool devices, from the chili pad bed system to, all kinds of other things, to expo passes, to all kinds of other prizes. So go to the energyblueprint.com/paleo, enter your name and email, enter that VIP contest right now. Then listen to the rest of this interview. So pause it if you need to, and then listen. So welcome, Keith Norris. I want to first give you a little bio, or read your bio here. So Keith is a former standout athlete and military veteran. He's an elite strength and conditioning specialist and a habit change expert with over 40 years of in the trenches experience. As a serial entrepreneur in the health and wellness space, he's a co-founder and chief development officer of the largest paleo platform in the world, which is Paleo FX. In addition, he's the CEO of Phoenix Equipment Group, LLC, and a founding member of ID Life, which is a company whose mission is health and lifestyle optimization. In his spare time, he authors one of the top fitness and personal development blogs in the health and wellness sphere, Theory to Practice, and is the author of The 5 T's, The Art of Goal Setting and Continual Improvement. And with that, I welcome you to the show, Keith.
Ari, thanks for having me, man. This has been a long time coming.
Yes,
like
indeed.
we said before you hit the go button, the last time we saw each other was at JJ Virgin's Mindshare Summit. Not enough time to chat there. So much going on, but yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, and I'm really excited to share this content. I think you're doing great work. I'm really a fan of what you're doing, and I like also that you walk the talk. You're in amazing shape, and that speaks volumes. So with that said, I want to first talk about Paleo FX. So I kind of gave a brief introduction to what this is all about, but I'd like you to talk a bit about it. And why paleo? Why paleo instead of just kind of like health effects, or like health more broadly? What is it about paleo that you identify with, or you feel is an important message?
Right. So way back in the day, say about 10 years ago, Michelle and I were budding entrepreneurs. We had both bailed on corporate America. And we knew that we wanted to do something to put a dent in the universe. And neither of us felt that we were doing that in corporate America. As irony would have it, I was in big pharma at that time and was, very disillusioned, went into big pharma, having come out of the military, really wanted to do something to, what I thought at that time, to help humanity. And, I wanted to make a good living while doing it, of course. But I wanted to help humanity, and I wanted to find some way to do that. And that, to me, seemed like the immediate path. As I matriculated up through the ranks in big pharma, I discovered that it's not the way it's made to be. Right? Big pharma is a business. I get it. Businesses exist to make money, but there were so many approaches to chronic disease that I thought big pharma was just missing the mark. And I knew another way and a better way to handle those diseases, and that had more to do with lifestyle and diet and exercise, and the rubber meets the road thing that people could do. Um, Flash forward, Michelle and I became entrepreneurs. I opened gyms. Michelle opened a catering business because she's a trained chef, and we were off and running. Now during this time, and neither Michelle and I are functional medicine specialists or in any shape or form a specialists in those areas, and so we had to lean on people and ask questions and get information, and we just had this amazing network of practitioners and very, very smart, specialized people in all of these areas. And eventually we thought, if we have a superpower, it is that we are super connectors and we love bringing people together. So why not bring all these people together and create, at that time, we thought it would be a mastermind type situation. We'll get a couple hundred people together, bring in some attendees, and it'll be a great, little gathering and trade of information and rubbing of elbows, and this will be a good thing. Well, that first iteration of the quote unquote mastermind we were going to throw turned into people. We had to scramble for a venue, and it just took off after that. I mean, it was beyond our wildest dreams. We had no idea it would turn into what it has turned into today. And we have loved every minute of it. And it just, right now we always say it's an unruly teenager, and it just kind of does what it's going to do. And we just try to keep some borders around it and let it be what it's going to be. The show itself is really dictated by the tribe, the collective tribe. What do they want? Who do they want to see? What do they want to hear? And what kind of activities do they want to see at this show?
Yeah. And I want to get into tribe in a minute.
Right.
But first, I want to talk a little bit more about this paleo idea. So
Right.
I know that when you talk about paleo, you're talking about a kind of a gist of like natural health, of being aligned with kind of our ancestral environment and lifestyle habits.
Right.
But there are a lot of people who maybe don't know enough about paleo to really get that. And there are a lot of, for example, people who are vegans, who are influenced by vegan thought leaders, and
Right.
who are like, oh, paleo, that's nonsense. That's terrible stuff. It's just meat-based diets, and that's all paleo is, and it's bad for you. And I got to avoid anything with paleo in the title. Okay, so what would you say to somebody who's kind of coming from that frame of mind?
It's very interesting you brought that up, Ari, because a few years ago we had the same idea. We thought, if we really want to put a dent in the universe like we both do, we're going to have to drop this paleo term and find something else that is more inviting and encompassing of whole health. And we thought about that, and we thought about, okay, well, if we drop paleo, what will we call it? And we racked our brains. We thought, health kept coming up, but health is such a watered down term.
Yeah.
And we couldn't figure out what to call it, if not Paleo FX. Then we talked to some branding experts, and every branding expert we talked to said, if you abandon this term now, you are crazy. You are absolutely crazy. You have built this tribe, and now you are in a position to own the term. Now you define it. What is paleo to you?
Mm-hmm.
You define it, and you start pumping out that information because it's your term now.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done exactly that. So we took that to heart. We maintained the paleo brand, the name, and we have expanded it. So if you come to Paleo FX, will you hear talks on diet and exercise? Absolutely you will. And that's really how we started. That was the area we started in. But you also hear talks on psychedelics and shamanism and personal relations and emotional, mental health, all of these other aspects. So we really have created seven pillars of health. And we believe that to be an optimized human being, you really need to elevate all 7 of those pillars.
Mm-hmm.
And if you focus on just one, say diet and exercise, that's great. But if you let the others slide, you're no better. And so we have now termed paleo an all-encompassing health optimization movement.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting. You mentioned vegans and vegetarians. We actually had Joel Kahn at the show last year,
Mm-hmm.
which was super interesting. A lot of eyebrows, obviously,
So
but we're like,
you don't like bang vegans over the head with a club and like cannibalize them or anything like that?
no, 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 no. I I get the whole idea of the vegan vegetarian movement. I totally get it. And from, we do a lot of things in our lives in the name of ethics, in the name of religion, and all of this that aren't necessarily healthy, right? Optimized health. Now, there's ways that, and you know this, and your listeners know this. If you are a vegan vegetarian for ethical reasons, there's ways to supplement around it. You can bolster the diet. I personally don't believe it's the best diet you can eat, but I have no hate for those who choose to eat that way.
Mm-hmm.
Let's bring, and here's the other thing, we agree on 90%, right? None of us want to see, and if we're talking about the humane raising of animals, none of us want to see CAFO operations. None of us. Paleo people don't want to see that. Obviously, vegans, vegetarians don't want to see that. So what are the things that we can agree on? And I think that's the better starting point than to find the nitpicky stuff that divides us all.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. Also, on the paleo, kind of the original idea of the paleo diet, there are certain things like that have become somewhat controversial. So, for example, grains,
Right.
legumes,
Right.
dairy, and different paleo experts over the years have kind of re-envisioned some of those. Should we really be avoiding dairy? Should we be avoiding lentils, despite the fact that, lentils are clearly associated with good health from basically,
Right.
every study we have on them? Should we be avoiding whole grains? Like, what is the evidence for and against that position? I'm just curious, in your envisioning of paleo, given that you run Paleo FX,
Right.
how do you feel about some of those, kind of paleo dietary issues?
So this is one thing that I can give total kudos to this tribe and the people within this tribe, and especially the thought leaders within this tribe, is they will change an opinion given evidence,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so you've seen the opinions change in 10 years over the idea that grains and legumes must absolutely be avoided.
Mm-hmm.
Depends. It depends on your personal situation. It depends on your health conditions right now. It depends on if you're super sensitive to those types of foods.
Mm-hmm.
So what we generally say is, here is the basic paleo template, Freudian slip. Here's the basic paleo template. Give it a run for 30 days. See how you look, feel, and perform, and then tweak it from there.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to add grains into your diet or legumes or whatever the substance is, now that you've given it a run for 30 days and you've been relatively clean, go ahead and add them back in. See how you look, feel, and perform.
Yeah.
Right there. This isn't a religion. All it is a template. And you've seen people like Rob Wolf change his stance on a number of things, and and that's what I love about the people in this movement. Chris Kresser the same way.
Mm-hmm.
If they have overwhelming evidence that contracts what they thought prior, they have no problem saying, hey, I thought this before, I've seen the evidence, now I'm changing my position, which is very, very heartening.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. So you mentioned earlier tribe and community. I personally think that this is a much undervalued and underappreciated factor in health and the human experience, not just health, kind of the functioning of our organism at a cellular level, but also our happiness, our experience in life, our sense of meaning and satisfaction in life. What is your take on tribe and community as someone who is actively taking steps, which I think are amazing, wonderful steps, to build more of a tribe and community with this event and with this platform of Paleo FX?
Right. Ari, I used to say that stronger people are harder to kill, right? And I still think that's true. I think that physical exercise and just having your body be physically fit really armors you against a lot of insults. But now I have changed my thinking to include tribe with that, because that emotional well-being, I think, is as powerful as the physical well-being when it comes to having an organism out in the world that is bulletproof.
Not
It
only
allows you
that,
to,
but having backup helps too. It's way
yes,
harder to kill a bunch of individuals than one by
right,
himself.
right. And there's just study after study after study that has rolled out that has pointed to this concept of tribe. It's just very hard to wrap a definition around what does tribe look like?
Mhm.
Tribe can look like, an extended family, living with an extended family, which in our culture is really frowned upon, right? But in other, especially Mediterranean cultures, that's the norm,
Mhm.
right? So it can be, and yes, it incorporates that, but it's also your network of friends. And we're not talking about your 5,000 Facebook friends. We're talking about your intimate contacts, of people that you can talk to on the daily. And this is so very, very powerful. And there's a great book on tribe. It's called Tribe, by Sebastian Junger. I don't know if you've read it or if
Yeah.
you're listeners, but it is a fantastic look at just what tribe means to
Mhm.
people. And I wish that when I was in the military, I had access to that information, because I can tell you, Ari, I would come back off of extended deployments and I would come home. The whole thing you're thinking about while you're on deployment is, I got another 120 days. I got another 100 days. And you're just counting the days till you get back home. Then you get back home and you're depressed. And at that time, I could not figure out what it was. I thought I was freaking crazy.
Mhm.
Why would I? Now I'm home with my wife and kids and family, and I'm back in the US with all of this. And all I can think about is going back on deployment. Why is that? I must be nuts.
Mhm.
And the whole thing, it was tribe, right?
Mhm.
When you're on deployment, you have to rely on a close knit group of guys to see you through.
Mhm.
I put my life in your hands, you put my life or your life in my hands. And there's something about that is just so compelling. And
Mhm.
Sebastian Junger does a great job at spelling out exactly why that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I recommend a lot, and I've talked about this a couple times on the podcast in some previous episodes with psychologists. But there's a great book by Philip Cushman. It's called "Constructing the Self, Constructing America," and it's basically a history of psychotherapy and kind of the origins. Like, it tracks from a historical perspective, the origins of psychotherapy as a profession. Um, and really positions it in the historical context of the dissolution of tribe and community.
Right.
And the more we lost tribe and community, the more it became necessary for people to seek out therapists, the more mental health problems, especially depression and anxiety, and this kind of low level sense of like emptiness, of a void,
Right.
something's missing in my life, like what you're describing after you came home from deployment. It's
Right.
like, why? I don't get why. Intellectually, I can't really understand why I'm
Right.
depressed. I'm out of this stressful environment, and yet there's something missing, and I'm secretly craving to be with sort of my band of brothers,
Right.
and that's what we're missing. I think it's a huge factor in health, as obviously you do as well. um, I was going to mention one other thing, which is, I think for a lot of people, I can speak from my personal experience as a man, but I think this is true also of women to a large extent. Um, for men, I think we bond, we connect to each other through lived experiences, and often
Mhm.
like hard physical
Right.
experiences, whether that's athletics as a kid or whether it's a military
Mhm.
experience, whether it's kind of like an outward bound, outdoor
Right.
adventure type experiences. But these are where bonds between men are formed that really are lasting bonds.
Right.
I think women connect a little bit more just through conversation and just being in each other's presence and speaking and connecting emotionally. But for, for men, like I'll speak for myself as a 36-year-old man, I find it's not easy to make friends at this age with other men, like real deep bonds with other men. Like, I'm very close with my brother. He's my best friend, and we have a lifelong bond. There's a couple other guys that I have that kind of relationship with, but it's really hard to make new friends and cultivate a new tribe. I think it's also true in this day and age for women. It's difficult as an adult to make new friends. do you have any suggestions on how someone could apply kind of this information about tribe and community? How can they take that and sort of, what can they do to cultivate more of a community or tribe?
Right. Well, there's one thing that's available to everybody in just about every city in America, and that's and I am. There's a lot of things about CrossFit that, from a strength and conditioning coach perspective, I could ping on. But the one thing that they nailed is tribe.
Yeah.
Right. Very, very difficult workouts if if they're scaled such, and you're in a tribe. Your box is your tribe. They nailed that. And that's, I mean, that's just a daily thing you can do. You can just, and it doesn't have to be CrossFit, but it can be some kind of thing like that. Spartan races or another example of things you can do in that arena. I can tell you personally, when I was in the pharmaceutical industry, I lived a little bit closer to West Virginia at that time, and we would go twice a year and do whitewater rafting. Just a group of guys just out whitewater rafting. I mean, it's so cool. You can find those little pockets all over the place. And I just bring up CrossFit because that's the easiest one. That's just about every city you can go to.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that is, if you ask me why CrossFit succeeded over the last 2 decades to the point to where they are now, just starting off as just a little online thing back in the late 90s to where they are now, it's tribe, man. People gravitate to that. They really, really want that. And yeah, you're right. Sporting activities when you're younger, the military when you're younger, all of those are great activities. But you can join in a CrossFit or these rafting, and rafting is just one example, Spartan race, whatever it is, you can join in those, and they are so much more than just the activity itself.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's great advice. So you mentioned a couple times now plant medicine, psychedelics. Sure. How does that fit into this picture of paleo effects? So what about it is paleo, or how does does it relate to this whole concept of health optimization?
Well, I think, if we want to look at this from the through a paleo lens or through an ancestral wellness lens, every culture has a shaman medicine man whose job it is to mediate between the natural world and the human consciousness. And it just depends on where that particular tribe is located as to what plants they use for these purposes. It could be mushrooms, could be ayahuasca, could be wachuma, could be any of a number of these substances. But I think it is part and parcel to the human condition to explore one's consciousness. And in our culture, especially in the last 40 years, 50 years, that was really not only poo-pooed, but outlawed. Right. But I think it's so very important from an evolutionary perspective that we come back and revisit that. And that's what drew me to it from that aspect, is of just studying shamanism in general, and just noting that every culture on the face of the earth has some aspect of navigating human consciousness.
Yeah.
So that's what drew me to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So what, this is a challenging question, for people who have never experienced a plant medicine journey like what you're describing, how would you describe the experience and the potential benefits that one could get from going and having an experience like that?
Yeah, so generally in our culture, when you talk about psychedelics or plant medicine, it's associated with party, the rave scene, this, that, and the other. And believe me, when I was younger, I I had pulled out all the stops. I mean, I'm no stranger to that scene. But this is totally not that. These ceremonies are very humbling. They are respectful of the medicine, and they are done with the purpose of diving deep and doing deep psychological, spiritual work. And Terence McKenna famously said that he was speaking of psilocybin, that set and setting makes all the difference in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true with any psychedelic or with plant medicines. The set and setting sets the tone of how the journey is going to work out for you. And experience wise, yeah, it's very hard to describe in normal language what you experience in these states.
Well, let me ask it this way. Like, how would you describe it relative to, if you're describing it as sort of doing deep psychological work, how would you describe it relative to, let's say, a psychotherapy session or doing psychotherapy on a regular basis or meditation?
Right. So, people in these realms will tell you that that one ayahuasca journey is worth 10 years of psychotherapy. And it is that intense, or can be that intense. It is a rocket ship ride in the deepest depths of your consciousness. Sometimes that's blissful and puppy dogs and rainbows. And other times you're left fighting demons the entire time. There is, if you believe what the shamans say there, and I do, there is an inherent intelligence in all of these medicines, and the medicine knows what you need and when you need it. And it will either impart information to you or kind of unlock the door to your subconscious and let those things come out that you need to deal with, that have been locked away by your conscious mind, probably for good reason, so that you can walk around in the natural world and still be a functioning human being. And let that stuff out so that you can deal with it in a space to where you can deal with it. So I have had personally just so many revelations of things that have hamstrung me in my normal day-to-day life and how I react in certain situations, but being able to go back and dive into my subconscious and see why I react that way and be able to untangle the threads of that has led me to live now a much more productive life just here in the day-to-day.
Yeah.
And again, could I have gotten there through meditation or psychotherapy? Maybe. But utilizing these plant medicines in the right form and fashion, and with the right facilitators, which is hugely important, I feel like I fast-tracked to healing, really.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think there's also something. So I've gone through a PhD program in clinical psychology. I have quite a bit of experience there, and I have quite a bit of experience with some plant medicine journeys. And I would actually agree with the general sentiment of a strong plant medicine journey being something like equivalent to 10 years of psychotherapy or 10,000 hours or something to that effect. I also actually think even beyond that, there's places that you can access, or there's blind spots that you can be shown, you can be forced to look at, and in a very painful, very uncomfortable, sometimes very saddening way, that with plant medicine journeys that you might never access through any amount of psychotherapy, because to some extent they're just kind of accessing, I think, different aspects of consciousness. Like, so much of psychotherapy is you're still in this kind of more stereotypical left brain, sort of intellectual, more analytical frame of mind, where you're kind of looking at things very consciously, very, very analytically, very logically. And a lot of what happens in a plant medicine journey is not logical. And it's not stuff that you can arrive at through any amount of sort of intellectualization. And in fact, I would argue that in many cases, more and more intellectualization just creates layers of delusion that actually act to inhibit your ability to see some of these blind spots about your ways of functioning. So it's, as you said, it's definitely not all sunshine and rainbows and unicorns. I've had some very painful experiences on this. This is not something that like is addicting, that you're looking to go back to it every week and have another one of those experiences because it's just so fun. it's not like an ecstasy trip, you know. It's
Right.
something that can really be deep and dark and teach you some painful lessons and show you some stuff about your ways of being in the world that are not very nice to see, and that
Right.
really just be like, hey dummy, maybe you should knock this off, you know.
Right.
And I've personally had some experiences that have legitimately altered my course, as far as my career. I mean, why I do what I do now, and have altered my relationships profoundly, and maybe even saved my relationship with my wife. So
Right. Right.
I'm absolutely a big advocate of this for the right person, and you know, maybe you want to speak to that as well. I said a lot there, so I'll let you go
No, I
where you want to go with all that.
no, I totally agree with everything you said, Ari. It is very, very difficult and serious work. And if you know your listeners out there are contemplating doing this, number one, first and foremost, you have to find a practitioner who is on the up and up and doing. If there's any downside to the recent popularity of these types of substances, is there's always people who want to capitalize on that popularity, right? So you have, you know, people are starting to crop up that have no business facilitating these ceremonies, and
Yeah.
so um, recommendations, word of mouth, you know, just check the person that you're journeying with. That's first and foremost.
Hmm.
And number two, once that is done, it's not easy. Like you said, you are signing up for some serious hard work, and not just at the ceremony itself, because that's just the beginning of it. It's all the integration that follows in the days and weeks after the ceremonies. That's
Hmm.
very, very important, because if you don't integrate all of this, all of that hard work means nothing. You just went through the ringer, and okay, so you went through the ringer.
Hmm.
If you don't go through the integration and actually make changes in your day-to-day life, then it's kind of all for naught. You might
Yeah.
have had a, you know, you might have had a rocket ship ride and the show of your life, but did it do anything to change your life? That's going to be up to you in the days and weeks following. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
well,
I
you know, with if I can add one thing to that,
right,
there's a you just reminded me of a quote from, I think it might have been Carl Jung, or one of the Jungian therapists, in the in a book on dream analysis, I was reading during my PhD program. There was one quote that stood out in my mind, which was, "You have a responsibility to the dream," which is a different way of thinking about it. Most people think of dreams as sort of just these random, you know, visions and things that come to them in their sleep. And then you kind of like, oh, that was interesting, and then you forget about it.
right,
And so what is meant by this? You have a responsibility to the dream. Basically, it's, if you analyze your dream and uncover some message from that, something that's being communicated to you, you have a responsibility to it, to try to live that out, to practice
right,
living that message out in your daily life, to turn it into something that you're actually consciously implementing in your life. And I've always looked at these journeys in very much the same way,
right,
you know, as you were
right,
just getting at, that these are, it's not just you have an experience and then, you know, everything's changed from then on out. It's, you have a responsibility to that experience, to the realizations that you had, to practice being a better person in the ways that it showed you.
right. And I love that parallel between the dream world and the in the ceremony space, right? Because, you know, in both of these, in kind of different ways, your subconscious is allowed to open up some. And so, you know, in the same thing in the dream world, you know, that is the opportunity. Your subconscious is trying to speak to the conscious you, right? And a
Mhm.
lot of times it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, or you can't make heads or tails of it, but that's what it is. And it's on you to look at that, look at those dreams, wrestle with them, and try to figure out what your subconscious is telling you.
Mhm.
And a lot of that in the same way in the ceremony space. I mean, you're faced with things that that may be black and white that you deal with, but many times it's not. Many times it's in, you know, a language or a situation that you're kind of unsure. Well, what exactly is that? What am I trying to be told here, or what is being imparted to me? And that's where the integration part really comes in.
Mhm.
Sometimes you're smacked across the face with the obvious, and you're like, okay, yeah, I got that. But for me, you know, many times it's almost analogy or metaphor, And, it's not necessarily just black and white, but
Mm-hmm.
I, people ask me, I've done almost 70 ayahuasca journeys and a number of
Wow.
Wachuma journeys. And people ask me why I keep going back, and I asked myself very early on, after about the 15th or so ayahuasca, I was like, okay, what's going on here? Why do I keep feeling the need to go back? And the reason is because every time that I go in, it's number one, it's different. Everything about it is different from the time you take the medicine, the drop in, everything is different. And I've always come away with more things to work on.
Mm-hmm.
And it just keeps going and going. And there was a time there where I was like, there can't be any more. Oh my God. There just can't. I go back again. And yes, it's just peeling back layers of an onion.
Yeah.
You just go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And the teachings are more profound. The realizations are more profound. And it's just a beautiful experience. And I agree with you, Ari. I am a completely different person now than I was before I started this process. And
Mm-hmm.
I would like to think that I'm a more effective person. I would like to think that I'm a more loving person and just a better person to be around. And I really now know what my purpose here is in this life. And before that, I wrestled with that. I
Mm-hmm.
had imposter syndrome. I didn't know what I was doing. I was in this entrepreneurial game and I didn't consider myself an entrepreneur. How can this be? Um, and so I learned a lot about myself throughout this process, which I think is golden.
Yeah.
Yeah,
On a final note to wrap up this particular
sure.
topic, do you have any thoughts on who should or should not do this? Given that we've both
Right,
just kind of really spoken very highly of this as something that's profoundly affected and profoundly benefited our lives
right.
and us as individuals, are there any sort of warnings you want to say about who should or should not maybe look into doing an experience like this?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, and I tell people this who come to me face to face and want to discuss it, don't let me talk you into anything, right? If you feel called to this work, you'll know it. I mean, it will make itself apparent in your world. But don't let anyone talk you into doing anything. I think that's if there is a safety stop or a do not pass this line, it's if you have to make that decision on your own. Don't let anybody talk you into it.
Mm-hmm.
But you will know when you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
And from the medical side of things, the old standby of if people with history of schizophrenia and things of that nature, probably not good candidates
Mm-hmm.
for this. But otherwise, yeah, man, if you feel so called and you're willing to do the work, and again, this is not taking your car to the brake shop and you're going to come out everything's hunky dory. That's
Yeah.
just not the way it works. You are signing up for potentially a very rough few days, potentially, but you are definitely signing up for weeks and weeks and weeks afterwards of integration work. And you may find out things about yourself that you're not too pleased with,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we all have demons lurking in our subconscious. And if the medicine decides that you need to deal with one of these demons, you're going to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Well said.
right, but on the flip side, you always have tools. I have never been given a demon or something to work on that I have not also been given the tools with which to deal
Mm-hmm.
with that entity. Um, so yeah, and for those who want to dive into it, I would fully endorse them doing that. Again, with a caveat: find a practitioner who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's
Yeah.
everything,
Absolutely.
really. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I want to shift gears completely to training, which is
Sure.
really your wheelhouse more than anything. I
Yeah.
think that you've been in fitness and training for a very long time, and that's kind of your original
Right.
expertise within health, as it was for me as well. Um, so I know that you've talked quite a bit about health versus performance and
Right.
kind of like how you would train an athlete versus how you would train the average person to optimize their health. So let's talk a bit about how those different training programs might be structured.
Yeah. And so just laying the groundwork for this, I have been as an athlete, I've been on both sides of this, right? So in my early life, I was the highly trained athlete, and I was the guy living on the razor's edge of maximal performance, but one step away from just complete breakdown. And that's true of all competitive athletes.
Yeah.
It is so competitive that to be able to push the body to the point of maximum output, you're just running the razor's edge of anything going wrong and just crumble, tumble down. That's why, by the way, that competitive athletes are young because they have the resilience to be able to accept that stress, but they also don't have the time in the trenches to have fallen apart at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. And I think that's very, very important for people to realize when they take on a training protocol is if you are not a competitive athlete, there is no reason whatsoever to push the body to a state that keeps you on that razor's edge.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just keep some common sense about this. I don't train that way now either. When I look at the way that I train versus the way I trained when I was in college, it's although the principles are the same, because principles are few, methods are many. Although the principles are the same, I have dialed down a lot of things and it made it to where I plan on doing this, Ari, for the rest of my life. And I plan on living well into my hundreds. I'll just say that. And training is going to be both a piece of that and a reason why I continue to live, but it has to be done in a smart fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. So from a practical standpoint, what do some of the differences look like as far as how an athlete might train, or how you train when you were an elite athlete versus how you might train somebody today who is just sort of looking to be healthy and energetic?
Right. So a lot of it is time investment. So the time investment that I put in personally, or when I train, I don't train clients personally anymore because I have since sold my gyms because thanks to Paleo FX taking off, I just didn't have the time to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Although I still love it, I still stay in the game, but there is a time limitation for the average person, right? And that's cool. You don't need a whole lot of time to be in tip-top shape. You really don't. I mean, my workouts, although I generally work out just about every day, but that's more for mental health than it is for my physical well-being. But my workouts are rarely more than a half hour.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're very short, bam, to the point. I'm in, I get the work done, and I'm back out and doing my thing. An athlete can't do that. An athlete, just by definition of having to work skills and the idea that they have to maintain every piece of their body to the tip-top condition, just means they're going to have a lot more time investment. So what does that look like practically? If someone comes to me and says they want to be a healthy human being and look great, feel great, look good naked, all of those things, and they're expecting that it's going to take them 2 hours a day, 7 days a week to do that. No, it's not. It's not going to be, that's not at all what it's going to take. Versus if a high school senior comes to me who's a D1 prospect and says, yeah, I want to play college football, but I only want to devote 30 minutes a day to working out. Sorry, that's not going to happen either.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we have to figure out what side of this spectrum we're on. And mostly what that boils down to is, if you're in a situation like I am, I utilize exercises that are big bang for the buck exercises: deadlifts, sprints, dips, pull-ups, all variations of those exercises. Those are the 80%, right? And doing those and smart mixing and matching of those, you're off and running and you're great. Now, when I was a competitive athlete, that wasn't going to cut it, and a lot of the extra time for a competitive athlete from the strength and conditioning side of it means that they have to do a lot of high rep exercises. It looks a lot like bodybuilding. Number one, to put on muscle mass. That's kind of the lesser effect, but number two, for tendon and ligament strength. And that's kind of the only way you can really build up some serious tendon and ligament strength is by high exercise. And that just takes time. It takes a mind-numbing amount of time to be able to do that. In fact, if you look, I don't know if you follow Louis Simmons at Westside.
Yeah.
80% of their work throughout the year is ancillary work. And what does ancillary work look like? It looks like bodybuilding work.
Mm-hmm.
There's only 20% that's dedicated to the meat and potatoes of powerlifting, or to maximize speed and maximize strength. 20%. The rest of it is ancillary work. So the normal person can look at that and go, if elite, the number one powerlifting team in the world, is spending only 20% on the meat and potatoes stuff, what does that mean for me, the average person?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we can draw some conclusions from that. And I do.
Yeah.
I think Louis Simmons is the whole Eastern Bloc training system I've been a big fan of since I was a kid. I was lucky enough to be trained with people who were just starting to implement these types of training methodologies when I was young, and they worked. The concurrent conjugate method, I think, is far and away superior to any linear periodization that you can put out there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's just presume that everything you said there in the last 45 seconds completely lost 90% of people who know nothing about periodization and Eastern Bloc training methods and all that stuff.
Right.
So on a very, I think you're like, there's a language that we can speak to one another.
Right.
As people who have been doing this I've been doing it for 20 years. You've been doing it for 40 years. So there's another language we got to speak to, like the average 50-year-old man or woman who's never done weight training before in their life.
But let me give you my last 3 days of workouts. It'll take me 30 seconds.
Yeah,
and this
please.
will clear up a lot of confusion. 3 days ago, I ran sprints, 60-yard sprints, 2 sprints in a row. Then I went and did muscle ups with a bar that looks a lot like kipping pull-ups for people who are familiar with CrossFit, only it's on a fixed bar. Muscle ups and body weight dips. I did 5 muscle ups, 25 body weight dips, 2 sprints. I went through that circuit 5 times. Bam,
nice.
Done. Back on my bike, back home. The following day, I did heavy trap bar deadlifts, supersetted with a floor press. So floor press looks very much like a bench press, except you're lying on the floor underneath the bar, right? So it's a little bit, it limits the range of motion for the press slightly. Again, 5 rounds. And in the floor press, I was around, I picked a weight where I was about 5 repetitions. And in the deadlifts, I ramped up to a weight where I was doing 3 reps.
Yeah.
Once I hit the weight.
Just let me interject real quick. So for people listening, you have no idea what the names of these exercises are. Deadlift is basically picking a heavy weight up off the ground.
Right.
The floor press is like, it's a pressing motion like a bench press, or you could also do in the place of something like that, like a push up if you're doing body weight exercises.
Sure. Or dips or, whatever. So the idea is I have roughly a push pull. It's how I set up my weight training. It's in a push pull fashion. So if I'm doing some kind of press, I'm doing some kind of a pull, and I'm just going back and forth between the 2 exercises. That's the absolute easiest way. And that's what I do. 90% of the time, that is my workout. Now there's every now and again, it'll be a Sunday. I've got the key to the gym, and I just, I go back and do my bro thing. I'm back in my element again. I can spend 2 hours and hang out with the guys in the gym, but that's not my normal. My normal is 2 exercises back to back, rotating, 1 set here, 1 set there, 1 set, very, very short rest in between sets. And I get it done, bam, half hour, I'm out of the gym and I'm back home. And that's including the warm up. So
gotcha.
It's just as easy as that.
Okay. So there's a few different goals someone might have with an exercise regimen. I mean, there's obviously more complexities than this, but let's just break it down to, like, someone's interested in muscle mass, someone's interested in fat loss, or someone's, screw body composition. I don't care about fat loss or muscle gain. I just want health, energy, longevity.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts on how you might structure those different training programs differently for people with those different goals?
For me, and so this is something I thought, let me back up a little bit. When I was in the pharmaceutical industry, kind of my hobby at that time was training collegiate football players, right? I just happened to be in an area where there was a college there, and I got to know the strength and conditioning coach. I was looking for a place to train. He was looking for someone to help train football players, and so it was a beautiful marriage. And I trained football players and volleyball players too during this period, very long period. Then I exited the pharmaceutical industry, which meant that relationship ended, moved to Austin, opened gyms, and now I'm training the general public, which I have never done before because I've constantly been with athletes. And I thought, I'm going to have to totally re-gear my training for each one of these types of individuals coming in. But what I found out over the years was the prescription for everything that you just described, all of those buckets, is pretty much the same.
Mm-hmm.
If I can get people stronger in basic exercises, their body will take care of everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we might want to fine tune here and there after, if someone wants to put on a little bit more muscle mass, okay, we're going to skew things to a little bit higher repetition, get more repetitions in. And it also depends on the muscle fiber makeup of the person. I know we're getting out in the weeds again, but some people just have a propensity to put on muscle, others don't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's largely a genetic thing. So we have to navigate that. But largely, Ari, the prescription for the average person is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Lift something heavy, a number of repetitions, do it consistently, and everything else will take care of itself. Really, it's that easy. Seriously, that easy.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on endurance training? Does endurance training fit into this paradigm? Is that something that you recommend, or is it just sort of a personal preference thing? If somebody likes doing that activity, hey, go do it,
Right.
but we're going to focus on this other kind of training.
Right. I think it's more personal preference, Ari. I don't think that a lot of endurance training is needed for overall health. I think if you train in the way I just put out, it's a cardiovascular hit. Let me tell you, going back and forth with heavy weights like that with very little rest, that's a cardiovascular workout too.
Yeah, especially if you got sprinting in there, like one of
right,
those workouts you gave.
Now, if someone wants to compete in something like, hey, I have a 10K coming up that I want to run. Well, you're going to have to put some time on the road. That's just, now there's smart ways to train to where you don't beat yourself up, putting in a whole lot of miles on the road training for a 10K. That's a whole other discussion that we can have. But for instance, I rode a 500-mile bike race in Oregon back in June. Did very, very little training to get ready for that, but I was able to do it largely because I had this base of lifting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now I still had to train on a bike to be able to pull it off. And oh, by the way, I didn't train enough because I ran out of runway, but I was still able to do it. Here's somebody who spends most of his time in a gym and just decides because his friend is going to go out to Oregon to ride a 500-mile bike race. Said, okay, I'll go with you. It sounds like fun. Boom, get on a bike and you're off and do it. Now, I wasn't.
It's funny that you said that sounds like fun. If somebody invited me to do that, I'd be like, screw you, I'm not doing that. That sounds like the most masochistic thing I could possibly dream up.
Well, let me just say, it sounded like a lot more fun before I actually got to Bend and was like, oh, this is a thing. These people are serious. Now, was I competitive? No. I mean, I wasn't the front of the pack. I wasn't pushing, each day's, winning or each one of the day's races. That was not me. I was pulling up the back. But the fact that a guy who could just roll out of the gym and be able to hop on a bike and do that, I think it speaks to not me, but it speaks to the efficacy of this type of training.
Yeah.
Now, if I were to take it more seriously, I could start rolling in longer bike rides, and maybe I could be at the middle of the pack.
Yeah. Well, you're also a big guy. I mean, what are you, 230 pounds or something?
Actually, I'm 205. Yeah, I look a lot. Yeah, I look a lot bigger than I actually am. So, which is about the weight that I played college football at, by the way. So,
interesting. Yeah, that's the weight that I am as well.
Right.
So the other side of this, as far as endurance training is, people who are, the average person who knows nothing about fitness, no background in exercise science, they don't really know anything about it. They are typically, in most cases, not going to start by going into a gym and lifting weights. Right. They're going to start by going on a treadmill or a stationary bike. They're going to start with some kind of endurance exercise or cardio, because that's kind of what they, most people in the general public think is kind of the best form of exercise or the healthiest form. So, to the average listener, and I'm sure there's a large portion of people listening to this who are maybe go to the gym or maybe do exercise 3 times a week or 4 times a week, and they just do jogging or bike riding or swimming or something like that. What would you say to them about how they could optimize their training?
Right. Well, the first thing I would tell them is that I believe, and I've seen this I've seen this play out so much over my training career and over my life, that really muscle is metabolic currency, right? So the more muscle someone can carry within reason. Now, as soon as I bring up carrying muscle mass, people think professional bodybuilder, right? And that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And not at all what I'm talking about. I am just talking about a healthy amount of muscle mass on a human frame, whether that's a female frame, male frame, whatever. That is really the metabolic currency. Anytime that you start to throw endurance work in there, you have just given your body the signal to jettison muscle, right? That's really the last thing the body needs at that point, right? This, and you can look at, the difference in physiology between a sprinter and a marathon runner, right? And that's kind of what we're talking about. Now, obviously, there's genetic differences there that magnify that difference, but the difference remains. So I think that from a health standpoint, if someone enjoys endurance work, absolutely, knock yourself out. I now enjoy riding a bike too, and I kind of roll that into the mix. But if you're looking for a bang for the buck exercise for your health, I think that should go on the back burner. Jogging, running, unless you're sprinting, right? And that's the whole other category. It's just not a bang for the buck exercise. But again, I get it. It's easy. Anybody can do it. It is accessible. Anybody can get running shoes and go out in the street and run. So if that's your only option, that's a hell of a lot better than sitting on the couch. I'll put it that way. But if I were to put a hierarchy on exercises, that would be pretty low on the hierarchy.
So what would be above it, just for clarity for people who maybe can't read between the lines there?
Any kind of weight bearing exercise, any kind of lifting weights. And again, it does not have to be fancy. It's picking something heavy up off the ground is about as basic as it gets. And oh, by the way, that's probably the best bang for the buck exercise you can do in the gym. If people are worried about that and worried about good form, and they should be, I mean, you need to have very, very good form. Seek out a trainer. I mean, and again, a lot like when we're talking about shaman, word of mouth means a lot.
I was going to say the same caveat.
Right. Same caveat. But there are very, very good trainers out there. You just have to look around for them. But I would really push people to if they're going to do endurance exercise because they love it, please add in weight bearing exercises on top of that to mitigate the muscle loss that's going to come from that. And oh, by the way, Ari, your listeners, and I know you know, that jogging is probably one of the more inefficient ways if you're thinking that you're going to drop weight. What happens is the calories you burn are minimal, but the body perceives that needing to make up way more than the calories you just burned jogging. So it's very, very difficult to use jogging or long distance running as a weight loss methodology. So
and it's really easy to get into the mentality of, oh, I just went for a 2 mile, 3 mile jog, and so now I can reward myself with some pizza or some chips, and then when all's said and done, 12 weeks later, you haven't actually lost any body fat.
Right. And the whole irony to this whole thing is, Ari, is the more you run, the more efficient you get at running. The more efficient the body is, which means the fewer calories you expend, during a run. So it's, and again, I don't want to dissuade people if it's the couch or running, go run. But I would highly encourage you to add some weight bearing exercise within all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Keith, we've covered a awesome range of different health topics here. This has been a super fun conversation. I would love if we could wrap up maybe with your top 2 or 3 key takeaways that you want to leave people with, which could either be things that you've already kind of mentioned, or if you want to inject 1 or 2 new pieces, feel free.
Yeah, I would say, number 1 is your right to explore your own consciousness as a birthright, and take it to heart. And, that doesn't have to be through psychedelics or plant medicine. It could be through meditation. It could be through psychotherapy. It could be through a number of different means. But that is your birthright, and there is so much to be gained by doing that from both from a personal perspective and what you can offer the world after you have become a better person. Number 2, we just talked about it. let's add some resistance exercise to our overall training. And again, it does not have to be super, super fancy, man, just super simple. I just gave you an example of what my workout was. Just lifted something heavy up off the ground and pressed something heavy off the ground, just back and forth. I mean, it's meat and potatoes, super, super easy and good for you. And lastly, I'm going to take the self-serving route here and come to Paleo FX. Seriously, this is a whole tribe thing, right? So this is a group of people. We're probably going to have close to 10,000 people this year. This is your tribe. This is a chance to connect. And to your point, Ari, you're going to meet like-minded people there from all over the world. And that's one of the things that we see year to year to year at Paleo FX is these groups of people who met at Paleo FX have little mini reunions at Paleo FX. It's a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Keith, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was a blast. Really, really enjoyed this. Everybody listening, again, go to theenergyblueprint.com/paleo. Go enter this VIP contest. Again, you can get all kinds of amazing prizes. There's a $5,000 prize package that includes airfare, hotel, and 2 VIP badges to the Paleo FX event. There's also all kinds of other prizes. theenergyblueprint.com/paleo. Also, I'm a speaker at this year's event. As I said before at the beginning, this is going to be an epic, must-attend event. And really, if you go to any health event in 2020, this is the one to go to. Of course, I'm going to say you definitely don't want to miss my talk. On a personal note, Keith, I want to say thank you to choosing me to be a speaker at this event. It's a big honor for me. I know you guys get, I think, like 500 applications or something
500.
from people reaching out to you to speak there. So it's a big honor for me that you guys and Michelle actually came to me and reached out, wanting me to be a speaker there. So thank you. Really, really a big honor for me. And I'm super excited to go. So again, thank you for coming on the show, and everyone listening, go to Paleo FX.
Thank you, Ari.
Yeah. Hey there, this is Ari again. One more quick thing before you go. Just make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Energy Blueprint, and also make sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform, whether that's iTunes or Stitcher or anything else. I hope you guys enjoyed this interview, and I will see you again next week.